If I may, I'm just going to run through those three real quick, and then
Yeah.
if you can kind of touch on that. So, first of all, as we have demonstrated, the value of truth is inseparable from the reality of the infinite. Uh, Secondly, you point out that one must be very clear about what is meant by fictional when referring to all stories as fictional. And then thirdly, you point out that we must seriously consider the urge to drop all stories. Um, could you kind of give us a breakdown on that and just kind of fill in the gaps on that?
Yeah, so that's sort of the cap on rebutting Harari. So uh, obviously we've talked about several times you need truth. If there's no truth, then we shouldn't talk. There's no point in us having a conversation. There's no point in listening to us. Nothing's making anything better. So that truth is there. Even if you say it's not, you're saying that it's true that truth doesn't exist. So and uh, then Harari's talking about sort of the juxtaposition between science and myth or story. And he's saying, all human stories are made up. All human stories are fictional, is the word he uses. And just, point out, drawing on the context of how he uses that word, he's basically using that to mean unimportant, not real, uh, untrue, essentially. And so that's a particular narrative, that's a particular story around what fiction is and its value in the world. That fiction is just this trash throwaway stuff that's, there to tickle your mind or whatever, but does absolutely nothing else. And that would be contrasted to another view that would say fiction is not attempting to be scientifically accurate, but it is attempting to resonate with some reality and to hope, in some cases at least, play with and expose some aspects of reality. And maybe it does that well, maybe it does it poorly, maybe it distorts what it should be doing. But that's a different lens to look at fiction through than unimportant junk. Uh, and then the third one, in light of all that, I'm saying we need to seriously consider the urge to drop all stories, meaning we need to seriously consider that and think about how ridiculous it is. So the the and again, Harari uses these stories. He uses and he even after he says we should drop all stories, he's like, but I'm going to use stories because we have to. You can't, then your whole argument is just doesn't work. So like, there's no reason to believe that it's would ever be effective to drop all stories, which he himself admits. So why are we making this claim that we should drop all stories if we also recognize that we can't and we won't? Um, but he also in his argument does this, and I think this is an important point to specifically touch on. He does this around making a claim that our true nature, I think is how he puts it, our true nature is not a story. Like the essence of who we are is not a story. Now, that might be true. I even have some sympathy with that to say that the essence in itself of who we are is not a story. Fine, but that has nothing to do with whether or not the meaning of life or significant truths that are useful to our lives can be communicated in a story. There's this weird jump that he makes and is just sort of brushed over, but the idea that we, because stories aren't this, because our own nature, our true nature is not a story, therefore all stories are useless or irrelevant. Like that one does not lead to the other. You could have, it could be true that your true nature is not a story. That doesn't mean stories are not essential to your life or helpful even in your life, to say even less. So it's not clear how or why you would step from your true nature is not a story, therefore all stories are bad. That's just kind of a wild leap that is underlying his argument there. So I think it's worth noticing that there's sort of a bait and switch there where he says, well, stories are all fictional, and plus your true nature isn't a story, so we should drop all stories. Well, but that's a disconnect. That's a non sequitur.
Right. It seems like it's just like you said, extremely contradictory. I mean, there are no parameters for truth in the argument as a whole anyway. If you're from the lines of nihilism, you need that kind of backdrop or that anchor to reflect everything off of. And that would be the truth. And that's interesting. It doesn't really make sense. What is he specifically referring to when he says the essence of who you are?
Right. Well, I mean, I could make a charitable case for him. I think he has some in that book in 21 Lessons for the 21st Century. He talks about some meditative states that he's experienced. And I mean, they sound somewhat profound, but the idea of, well, you need to experience your true self or your true essence or whatever it is. Okay, but you've just told me a story.
Right.
You need to do something. You are in a place where you haven't done it. You need to get to where you have done it. That's a story of a journey. Um, so even if it was true that I needed to experience my true self, and my true self is not a story, it's something outside of story, it's still clearly the case that a story is going to be part of me getting there. So it's just irrelevant. I mean, they're just not connected. Like they're completely compatible with each other. You can have story and the importance of story and your true self being something beyond story. That's completely fine. These are not incompatible things. So it does not work to set that up and say, well, because you need to experience something that's beyond story, therefore you have to drop all stories. Again, to say you have to drop all stories is a story.
Right.
That's saying that you are in a place where you're plagued by stories, clouding your vision or whatever, and you have to do some sort of arduous journey of casting those out or laying them down or whatever it is. You have to go through a process of doing that to get to the goal. That's a purposeful story. So again, there's always going to be a story.